Jews and Christians have been divided, but now God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover.
Today I want to focus on history, and the topic is the miracle of Jewish history. I'm going to talk not about one miracle, but in fact 7 miracles of Jewish history. 7 is an important number in Judaism, in the mystical tradition, the 7th day of creation, and so on and so forth. So let's begin. Number 6, there is a unique connection between a nation, this nation, and a particular piece of land. 13 times in the Bible, in the Torah, it promises, God promises that I will take you to Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. I will bring them to a beautiful land flowing with milk and honey. Josephus, 1st century of Common Era. The whole area is excellent for crops of pasturage, and rich in trees of every kind, so that by its fertility, it invites even those least inclined to work on the land. In fact, every inch of it has been cultivated by the inhabitants, and not a parcel goes to waste. It goes on and on and on. It's going to be a beautiful land. Everything will be produced there. However, after the exile, once the Jews are separated from the land, something mysterious is going to happen to the land. Unprecedented. Listen to this. Deuteronomy 29:22. And its soil will be nothing but sulfur and salt, a burnt out and devastated waste, unsown and unfruitful without a blade of grass. Leviticus 26:32. Check it out in your Bible. So devastated will I leave the land that your very enemies who come to dwell in it shall stand aghast at the sight of it. It goes on and on and on. Ramban, in the 13th century, one of the greatest thinkers living in Europe, gets the message that the land is devastated. And this is what he writes. He says, this constitutes a good tiding, proclaiming that during all our exiles, our land will not accept our enemies. Amazing. This also is a great proof and assurance to us. For since the time that we left our land, it has not accepted any nation, and they all tried to settle it, but to no avail. From the year 70 of Common Era until the year 1948, there have been many invasions of the Holy Land. Everybody tried to revive the land. It refused. As if the land says, no, I will work only for the Jews. It's incredible. Maybe an animal has that ability, but a piece of land says, I refuse to help you. You will starve to death here. Only when the Jews come back will I work again. It's incredible. You show me one scientist who can explain this. And I'm a scientist. This is amazing. Mark Twain. In 1867, Mark Twain visited Israel, Palestine, and he writes in the Innocents Abroad, there was hardly a tree or shrub anywhere. Even the olive and the cactus had almost deserted the country. No landscape exists that is more depressing than that which bounds the approaches to Jerusalem. Can you imagine? This is just 130 years ago. Those of you who have been to Jerusalem, you know. When you drive, I love that drive up. From the airport or from Tel Aviv when you go to the beach for a day, and then as you're driving up to Jerusalem, the air is different. The greenery, it's so romantic, it's so inspirational. Mark Twain stood on the same spot, and he says, at the end of that, he says, who would ever want to visit that place? Well, things have changed since then, haven't they? Total hopelessness. It's amazing. And yet, there is one more promise. One more promise from God. Number 7. Yes, you will be exiled. Yes, you will suffer. You will influence the world. But eventually, I'm going to bring you back home. I will bring you from the 4 corners of the world. And again, that has been quoted here many times already in the last couple of days. And then the land will prosper again. You will prosper. Everything will be wonderful. It's incredible. Listen to this. Isaiah 41, verse 18. I will turn the desert into a pool of water. Desert into a pool of water. In the desert I will place cedars, acacia trees, myrtles, and pines. In the wilderness I will place box trees, firs, and cypresses. Deuteronomy 30, verse 3. You will settle in the land, and God will make you even more prosperous and numerous than your fathers. In January 1997, just 6 years ago, World Bank declared that Israel is no more a developing country. It's a first world country. First level. What is it called? Like America, like England. It's incredible. Before this intifada, in the year 1999, Israel was the 23rd richest country per capita, income per capita. It was on the level of Great Britain. Can you imagine? A country 50 years old is catching up with England. It's amazing. The desert has literally turned into pools. You know that they say, apparently, the most expensive tomatoes in Europe are Israeli tomatoes. They're the sweetest. Israel, the tiny country, is producing, I think, they say, most of the tulips that you buy in Amsterdam today are growing in Israel. Can you imagine? In France, in Paris, you walk into a supermarket, some of the best cheeses are Israeli-made cheeses. Japanese computer companies are buying the chips from Israel. And this is with Intifada, with 5 horrible wars, with the wounds, with terrorist attacks every day. Can you imagine if they would leave us alone for a few years, what Israel is going to do? Ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubts that cancer will be stopped. There will be a solution to every single cancer, and I promise you one thing, write it down, and this is on tape. There will be a day when people will not die of cancer, and the solution will come out of Haifa or Jerusalem, Hadassah Hospital, or Weizmann Institute, the Technion. Just give us a chance for a few days. 1 million Russian Jews arrived there in the last 10, 12 years. 1 million Jews. Brilliant, educated, sophisticated. Just give them a chance. Put them in front of a computer. Give them a lab. Give them some tools, and you will see this country is going to become truly a light unto the nations. We will solve every problem, and Israel has been trying. We were talking to the Palestinians during the Oslo process. We were teaching them how to irrigate the land and so on. Listen to this. I was last year in Nairobi, Kenya, speaking to a similar convention to this one, talking to 400 pastors from all over Africa who love the Jewish people. They took me to the site of the bombings. You remember a few years ago, the American embassy, a horrible bombing, terrorists were bombed it. Do you know which was the first country that sent their team? It was Israel. The Nairobian government immediately said, please, send us your experts. You are the best. You know how to deal with this. The world should listen to the Jews, the Israelis. They know how to deal with terrorism. They've been, unfortunately, getting a lot of experience over the years. So this is the only tiger economy that is not in the Far East. Who could have predicted it? How is it possible? A young country like this, coming out of the ashes of the Holocaust. Who built this country? In 1948, when they declared the state, there were 600,000 Jews there. surrounded by 100 million Arabs. And who were those Jews? They came from the concentration camps, from burning Europe. They had tattoos on their arms. They were beaten down skeletons. They started the country from nothing, from scratch, under the threat of terrorism constantly. And 55 years later, look at this country. There is so much to be proud of. Who could have predicted it? It defies all logic. And yet, it was predicted. It says so in the Bible. So people ask me, am I optimistic? You know, the last 3 years have been very, very difficult for our brothers and sisters. Those of you who have been to Israel in the last 3 years, you know. People are depressed. You walk into the hotel, it's empty. You walk on Ben Yehuda Street, the most famous street in Jerusalem. People you see for closing, going out of business. It's sad. Some of my favorite shops are gone already. The coffee shops are closing. People, Americans are scared to visit, and Israeli kids cannot come because their parents are saying, I'm sorry, you will not go to Ben Yehuda Street. So the last 3 years have been very difficult. You know, I talk to my friends constantly. They say, every day you have to make a decision, like an existential decision. All right, I have to go to the supermarket. Do I take a bus? Do I take a taxi? Do I drive there? And you make the decision based on the latest developments of what Hezbollah is doing. Aha, the last 5 attacks were on buses, so I should take a car. And then Hezbollah or Hamas changed their tactics. So suddenly the cars are being exploded. So what do? Your child wants to go to piano lessons or to go to soccer. And you sit there and you're shaking and you're deciding, should I take the chance? A dear friend of mine tells a story, 16-year-old girl that came from America, made Aliyah. He's a professor there. His 16-year-old daughter says on a Saturday night, Daddy, give me some cash, I want to go to the movies. And he says, my wife and I beginning, honey, you know, there are good movies just came out on VCR, you know, DVD, you know, we have a new machine, let me go rent something. And she stops him. She's 16 years old. You know, 16-year-old Israelis are not like 16-year-old Americans. They're very deep and smart. She says, Daddy, is this why we made Aliyah? Is this why we left America? So I should be scared to go to a movie? Is this what Jewish land is all about? He says, my wife and I looked at each other and we were ashamed. She has a point. Finally, we have a free country, our country, and we're scared to go to a movie theater? So he says, I gave her a few shekels and she went to the movie. And for the rest of the evening, my wife and I were shaking, sitting with a cell phone. You know how Israelis live? You know that every 4-year-old has a cell phone? In America, many kids also have cell phones, but they're talking nonsense. I'm crossing the street right now. How are you doing? You know, yeah. In Israel, you have a cell phone because the moment you get on the bus, you call your wife and you say, I'm alive. The moment you arrive at the destination, you say, I'm still okay. You go to a movie theater, before the movie begins, I'm still alive. The moment the movie is finished, everybody turns on their cell phones to call their loved ones, I'm still okay. Can you imagine? The last 3 years have been very depressing. It seems like there is no end to this. It's getting worse and worse. So how can you be optimistic? Is there any chance for peace? Will they ever leave us alone? Will there ever be a free, democratic, safe, secure state of Israel? My answer is yes. How do I know? Because it says so. Who said so? The master of the world promised us thousands of years ago that the Jewish people will continue to influence the world and Israel will become a great nation. And with your help, thanks to Christians like you, serious Christians who take this book seriously, I have no doubt this gives me even more optimism. I'm speaking now as a rabbi. I feel passionately that you and I are the same. We have no friends left in the world. You and I have to work together. The world is a dangerous place out there. You see what's happening. The Islamic radicalism is taking over all over the world. It's not just in Israel. People who understand history and who understand the Bible have to wake up and to realize. Remember what I said last night? We are the miners' canaries. The anti-Semites always begin with the Jews. They never stop with the Jews. Do you remember the nuclear reactor in Iraq? The Israeli Air Force discovered that they are very close to actually building the reactor. We went and bombed the reactor, destroyed it. Do you know that the entire world condemned Israel, including United States of America? So the fact is, Saddam Hussein's of this world have come and they're gone. The Hitlers are gone. The Soviet Union, the great empire, where are they? Where is the Inquisition? Where is Stalin? Where is Roman Empire? They have come and they're gone. The Jewish people are here to stay and to continue to teach the world. And with your help, we're going to make it. God bless you. Thank you.
It's my understanding that Israel would like to become a member of the European Union. Do you think that's a good idea?
This is a complicated question. Obviously, there is an implied answer over there. The problem is, again, I don't know if you saw American Jewish Committee in the last few years has been publishing in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, a few other newspapers, a very powerful ad. It's very, very impressive. They show all the members of the Security Council at the United Nations. They show which countries are members, and they include Syria, they include Libya, they include many other interesting places and so on. And on the other side of the page, it shows which countries are not allowed to join the Security Council. How many countries are there on the other side? Only one, Israel. The same is true about the European Union. I don't know all the details about the advantages of joining or not joining, but just the fact that there is only one country that cannot join. Now, Israel, they claim that this is a technicality. What happens is Israel is not really part of Asia, is not part of Africa, is not part of Europe, so it doesn't belong to any of the original subgroups at the United Nations, so how can we join? How can they become considered Europe, and so on and so forth? Listen, I think Europe is going through a very painful time right now. I personally don't believe that this is a time to go to Europe. A lot of Jews, as you probably know, refuse to go to France in particular. You know, a lot of Americans refuse to buy French wines or French perfume. And France is not the only one, but France, I think, is the most obvious example. Europe is going through a very difficult time in terms of their moral values. That they had the chutzpah to stand up against America. That the French have forgotten 1941. They forgot 1944. They forgot what America has done for them. I'm wondering. I always was skeptical about the French and the choices Europeans make generally, except for England, obviously, and Germany. I must say, despite everything, Germany has proven to be a good friend to America and Israel. And again, by the way, this is a very good time for Americans to wake up and to look around the world and to say, who are our true friends? How many true friends does America really have? Which is incredible also. It's illogical. We're the most generous nation in the world, America. We go out of our way to support, to help people all over the planet, and they hate us for this. Israel is the one friend that has always stood with America, always voted with America at the United Nations. Not to say the other way around. It doesn't go the other way around. America has taken some votes that are more than controversial, sometimes indefensible, including the attack on the Iraqi nuclear reactor. It's incredible. Israel is a true friend. You remember the previous Gulf War. For the first time in Israel's history, Israel was taking this on the cheek. Now, I know for Christians it's a more kind of a, I don't want to get into theology, what does it mean to give the other cheek? But for Israel, this is such a fundamental concept. From the very beginning, the Zionists said, we will never allow ourselves to be attacked. We will always attack back. That 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when America went to war, Israel promised America not to respond and fulfilled that promise. 39 Scud attacks, and they did not respond. And as you know, America failed. That war was a failure. Here we are, 12 years later, we have to go back and lose our boys and girls again. That war should have been finished back then. Unfortunately, even America makes terrible mistakes. So I don't have a simple answer for you. But I think, in principle, Israel should be treated like any other nation. We do not ask for privileges, special exceptions. No. If Libya can be a member of United Nations Security Council, I promise you, Israel deserves to be a member of that council.
Last week I read on the internet that Kofi Annan wanted to make Jerusalem the world capital and put the UN there. Do you have any response to that?
The world capital. Kofi Annan, yeah. I would not trust my children's lives to Kofi Annan, you know. Listen, United Nations, it's very funny. Again, you will hear a little bit my life story a little bit later, but in the Soviet Union, United Nations was a major, major force. I mean, you read in Pravda every day, United Nations decided this, United Nations decided that. I had so much respect for that organization. I arrive in Israel, my second day in Israel, I see a car goes by with, it says UN. So I asked somebody, and with a black person driving there, I say, who are those people? This is the United Nations. I said, the United Nations? And these Israelis said, yeah, why are you so impressed? We cannot stand them. They're troublemakers. The fact is, United Nations, we know where they stand and what they feel about. And that's one of the problems with the roadmap. Ladies and gentlemen, think about this. Who is pushing the roadmap? There are 4 partners. United States of America is a separate issue. Whether you like what Colin Powell says or feels, that's a separate issue. At least it's a friend. But the other 3 partners, think about this. The Europeans, Russia, and the United Nations. Russia is going to decide the fate of the Middle East? What do they have to say? It's a third world country that is collapsing. What do they have to say? Putin, again, Americans are asleep. You're not watching what's happening there. There was a democracy 10 years ago there, or 7 years ago. There was free press. You know that he's closing every independent newspaper and TV station? At the excuse of getting rid of corruption. There is barely free press today in Moscow. Mr. Putin, Comrade Putin, was well trained. He's a KGB guy. He is going to decide where the borders of Israel are going to be. My children, my grandchildren have to depend on Comrade Putin. What was Comrade Putin doing when I was in jail? Who put me in jail? So be careful. So Kofi Annan, he's not my hero. He's not going to decide what will happen to Jerusalem. God will decide. It's in the Bible. He says what Jerusalem will be. Jerusalem was and is and will be the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
I'm Jim Becca. I've been a journalism teacher for many years, and actually I wrote my first newspaper story in 1973. And I've seen the world change a whole lot in that time, covering a lot of different stories. But one thing that upsets me a little bit, and this is what I teach my students, is that truth can never be bested by falsehood in the public arena. But what happens when so much of what you see in the media is not the truth, and it's overbearingly, blatantly bad or anti-good? And that's why I was really concerned. That's why I think that the crossover can be a powerful instrument in reaching people, because it's actually proclaiming the truth, the positive side of a lot of different things, and reaching out to people.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. The crossover exists to communicate to the Jewish community that there is a growing group of Christians who love them unconditionally. The focus of the crossover program is to promote a greater understanding of the differences and similarities between Jewish and Christian customs, history, and theology, while encouraging a closer walk with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As a second-generation Holocaust survivor, Rosalie's Jewish heritage includes parents who were protected from the Nazis by Christians. Yet for more than a decade, Mitch and Rosalie searched for meaning in life in the New Age movement. But after returning to their Judeo-Christian roots, they discovered God's purpose for their lives: to rebuild bridges between Christians and Jews. Now through TV, radio, the internet, speaking engagements, the healing room, and print and video resources, they are reuniting Jews and Christians in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Join Mitch and Rosalie as they tackle tough topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover. The Promised Land.
And I also tried to make it very clear to the Christians all over the world that they are threatened to the same extent as the Jews and Israel are threatened. And I also say basically that Jews and Christians are waiting for the Messiah, who is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. And that Messiah is going to come to Jerusalem. And so Christians share this faith with the Jews.
The Hebraic roots of Christianity.
And we began looking at Jesus through Jewish spectacles and not our Texas spectacles or American spectacles.
Join Mitch and Rosalie as they reach an ever-growing worldwide audience through The Crossover. We invite you to become a crossover partner right now by calling the number on your screen. For your monthly gift of $30 or more, you will receive the Crossover Partnership Pack, which includes a DVD of today's program, a personal greeting and prayer message from Mitch and Rosalie, and more information about the Crossover Project. As you continue to support the Crossover each month, you will receive a new Crossover DVD, plus a ministry report, and your name will be added to our healing room. Call now and join the growing family of Crossover Partners. And be sure to join us again next week as Mitch and Rosalie tackle timely topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover.